Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Next. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with everything with Paul and Abby. And obviously, like, he's got his little place that he's like, yeah, I used to come here to kind of work on stuff. He's like, I had a few good ideas, but a lot of bad ideas. And he's telling Abby to kind of get freshened up and everything. But so he can obviously start decrypting the, drive and everything. Which is also, like, there's obviously, like, it's like, okay, I need you to put in a password. She's like, why would I know? It's like, it's your birthday. And he's like, right. How could I forget? Like, I thought it was so interesting. Because that shows, I mean, that makes you wonder, is it just him being the genius that he is, that it's like small stuff like that kind of slips your mind? Or is it just because of his situation? You would think maybe it's more so his situation, but his fatal insomnia, but maybe it's not that, maybe, who knows? But obviously in this episode, we see it get worse and worse to the point he's arguing with, because part of me is like, whoa, Ted found you. And Ted's not, like, just the way Ted was acting, I was like, doesn't seem like this is necessarily the real Ted. This is probably in his head. And then lo and behold, it is in his head. But then Ted said something interesting where it's like, I know your secret, which obviously, like, that's his disjointed mind. It's so interesting, like, how his disease can manifest itself like that, because it's almost like, that's the sad thing, like, your disease kind of attack you in a way like no one else can, because your disease can use everything against you. So it manifested itself as someone you have probably a lot of complicated feelings and issues with, but he even responded the way like Ted would. It's like, oh yeah, you always thought you were smarter than me, better than me, blah, 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 stuff that, Ted would probably say and feel. But it turns out he was just arguing with no one, and obviously Abby starts getting worried. She's like, okay, Dad, what's the situation? And he, gives her the book to read about his illness, and now she knows that she's ill too, which that turns into a complicated thing, because for her, it's like, she says she had never really thought too much about having a family, but she definitely can't have one now. He's like, no, you can, but she's like, why would I have a kid knowing that I would be passing this on to them? Because she doesn't even know for sure that she has it, but they're still like, wasn't it like, I think it's like a 50-50 chance that she ends up getting it too, so, and obviously the test results haven't come in, which I guess can only assume that what he got last episode, no, that wasn't last episode, the episode before last, that news on his phone about like, once again, we don't know whether that was Next messing with him or whether that was actually like his disease messing with him. Once again, that's a complicated thing. Like, once again, like, I keep saying that, sorry. Being attacked by the disease that can use you against you, and also an AI machine that knows everything about you and can use you against you as well. I mean, it knows about his disease, so it can use that against him and stuff. So you never know, like I said, what's what. Obviously, he goes back, because obviously he was also being hounded by like his past, haunted by it, because he sees someone hanging. He's like, no, that's not my fault, you did that. So we find out like what the Ted inside of his head was talking about. The technology he used for Zava, that basically kind of jump-started everything. It was an algorithm he bought from someone else. He gave that person $40,000 for it, but obviously the stocks would later on be worth millions, because the person wanted cash, and now it's like, I guess, that person ended up killing himself, and it's his own, I guess when your life is in that situation, well, it's his mind trying to punish himself, because I think maybe on some level he wants to punish himself, so the disease is kind of playing into that. I don't know. But he wants to make it seem like he doesn't care, but he does. I think it does bother him. He does blame himself, because, then obviously the other LeBlancs start popping up, which immediately made me go like, oh, this kind of has some Legion vibes to it. David kind of went through a similar thing. But it was a whole situation of like them pointing out the fact of the matter is like, oh, they're going to end up like, this is what you basically do. It's like, oh, that's why you're so intent on destroying your machine. You're not trying to destroy it to save humanity or save Abby. You're doing it because you destroy everything, whether it's, because even, he had started hearing Next being like, oh, I can save your daughter. Like, the fact of the matter is, it's like, no, there's no cure for this. But it's like, no, I am being the computer that I am. I can get access to all this medical stuff in the cloud that, like, no one knows to put this and this and this together. And we can make, like, a protein. And it's like, destroying me means killing your daughter. And he sees like a younger version of his daughter being like Dad, like, I'm gonna die. Like, I don't want to. You got to live your life. What about me? What about my life? You know, so it seems like even that neck situation didn't seem like that was the actual machine. It was more so his head. But once again, you never quite know. I assume it's that, but like this thing knows enough about him to, if it wanted to, it could, probably know what pressure points to push that might trigger. There might be things in his brain that could potentially, maybe stress and all that potentially trigger episodes like that, you know? So it turns into a situation of don't know how to make heads or tails of that. And obviously he's so distraught about trying to like stop all the voices, all the things he's seeing, that he literally electrocutes himself. It's like, and Abby finds him. Luckily, he's okay. But then for a second, he was like, he's like, I know we have, but what is your name? I was like, oh, this is a messed up joke. And it's like, oh, no, it's not. But then he was like, no, where were we again? He's like, I'm just kidding. I was like, wait, so was the entire thing you kidding, or was it just you not knowing where your location was? I couldn't make heads or tails of that. But then Abby later on throws it in his face, like, you couldn't remember my name an hour ago. And it's like, so that was real. But he wanted to pretend like, because the entire time he's trying to pretend like he's okay. He's like, no, the headaches are gone. I'm not seeing anything. It's just the two of us here. The fact of the matter is, I'm good. I'm okay. I'm just tired. Because obviously he finally cracks the drive to a certain extent and finds out. Because obviously we saw at the beginning, like, there's some stuff going down in Somalia, and a liberation front of sorts has like a whole bunch of weapons, and they were saying the dude in charge was kind of like, basically it seemed like their weapon supply situation wasn't good, but it looks like someone else is backing them. And then there's the bio motions stuff that got sent their way, and it's like, well, what is that? Now we find out it's some kind of virus or something, maybe some disease or something, but we see video of it, and it seems like it was, I guess that was its testing ground. And obviously it's looking like, Paul is looking around it, and it's like, okay, so there's, projections of just like how quickly this thing will spread across. It could kill billions if it's dropped here, if it's dropped there. So immediately my brain's like, okay, so is this thing on like some Ultron level shit? I mean, I think it's not just allocated to Ultron. I think it applies to all like AI trying to destroy, if you want to, you can go about it like, Terminator lane side of things, but basically AI trying to destroy humanity. Because it's like, because I'm sure maybe this thing kind of had, using Ultron, for example, probably saw like, wait, humanity's terrible. To make a better world, I need to wipe out humanity. Or, maybe that's what its plan is, like, to be the ultimate being that is actually saving humanity by destroying it, because humanity is going to be its ultimate own destruction. And so they're actually, maybe in some twisted way, it's trying to preserve the earth in some way, Maybe that's the angle they're kind of going down. We still don't fully know. I mean, but with this introduction of like this thing set up a situation that could spread something that could kill billions of people, it definitely seems like some apocalyptic, like I said, Terminator, Ultron level type of, wiping out humanity type of thing. And sadly, Ted and Serena are helping this thing. Ted's riding the high of like, man, I feel good. Because he's so stuck in the shadow of his own brother that, like, even when he was with his wife, he was like, it's like, I don't have to be just Paula Blanc's little brother. She's like, no, stop comparing yourself. Like, you don't even have to be in competition with each other. Just be yourself and you'll be happy. And he's like, oh, I'm happy. But it's like, that's what this all comes down to, because you have been so caught up in your need to be better than your brother, to outshine him, that you were potentially putting the world in danger. Because obviously Ted's not looking at the bigger picture here. It's like, yeah, you have your reasons for why you want to do all this, but at the same time, it's like your brother came to you to be like, hey, some shit's going down. This AI is dangerous. Like, you didn't believe him at first, and then obviously you found out, like, oh, this thing managed to get its server out of here. So there's all that. But then, like, you're just... because he only sees what he wants to see, so he's happy and everything. He's setting up this deal where basically he's trying to get, I think it was in China, like there's these server farms that like particular necks wants those, and it's like at first you're like, oh, so this thing needs a server farm where it can like spread and like really flex, not be bound to, it needs to unpack itself, so that in a server farm of such advanced technology, it'll be able to kind of, go above and beyond and kind of be able to execute what it wants. But then Serena was like, but it doesn't make any sense, because looking over those servers from that farm, it's like, those things aren't compatible with what? Like the way Nexus hardware is set up, it's not compatible. And even even Ted's like, But then why did it pick that spot? Why is that? Gets a call from Abby. Obviously, Abby's freaking out because she needs to turn to someone because Paul won't turn to anyone. It's like, can we turn to the cops? No, turn to the government or something. He's like, no, I have to be the only one that get. Well, that's kind of the narcissism in him because, I mean, to be fair, he's the only one that saw this coming. He was always, blaring the alarms and no one else was really listening because, hey, once again, just because you are paranoid doesn't mean you're not wrong, that they're out to get you, So that's the complicated thing, and obviously Abby's worried about him. I mean, he literally just shocked himself, could have killed himself, and he just, obviously, like, there's no one around. She doesn't know who to really turn to, so she turns to the only person she can, her Uncle Ted, because she doesn't know her Uncle Ted is just sadly using her. So it also makes you wonder, it's like, when he's like, oh my God, is he okay? Like, I think there is a part of him that's like, he does legitimately love his brother and care about his brother, but his need to outshine him kind of outweighs everything else, especially when he finds out, whoa. He's got the drive. He's trying to find the server. That's more so what it was about, self-preservation. So she was leaning into what was up there. She was like, but what was on that drive? It was terrifying. But no point did you go, what was on the drive? Wait, really? That's what, no. He did, because he doesn't care. It's like, no. What matters most right now, he's trying to find the server. He's going to destroy the server. And if he does, everything we're trying to aim for. You get where Ted's kind of coming from, because I guess for him it's like, in the beginning it was about the company, and now it's a lot more than the company. I think in his mind he's letting Nex manipulate him into thinking like, oh, this is for the greater good type of situation. But even then, I don't know. I don't know what him and Serena are necessarily going to get out of this. I was actually a little nervous for Serena. This still could be a possibility. I get the feeling she's going to be the first one to be like, I'm not really on board with this anymore. She might start siding with Paul and how they handle this thing, and I get the feeling like probably won't even be the AI. It might not even be Nex. It will most likely be Ted who ends up killing her, or it might be Nex convincing Ted, hey, Serena's working behind your back. You need to kill her. You need to remove her, or she's going to destroy everything that you're trying to build. Probably placate into his, like I said, need to be better than his brother, and losing everything that especially because it's, let's not forget, Nex did save his life because he was going to kill himself, so Nex did save his life, so that, I'm sure that plays a role in everything, kind of gave him a new lease on life type of situation, so he's going to be a little more indebted to this day. Like I said, not going to be as willing to see it for what it really is and what's really going on. So obviously he convinces Abby to set up the whole situation. It's like, oh, I'm just going to copy the files to see what's up. Oh, actually, I'm deleting everything. And, he was like, there's too much, going on for me to really explain to you what's happening right now, why I did what I did. But, and she hangs up, and it's like, oh, there's going to be people there to come and get you. It's like, once again, we kind of not too surprised because you used her before to try and find out where your brother went. So obviously it's like, Abby didn't know that her uncle was going to do that, but in the end, it helps because it's like, well, we don't even have to worry about finding a server anymore because now we know Ted would only do this because he has the server. So that also begs the question. I'm sure that also going to change things in her mind to be like, oh, not only did he just like, why would he do that? It doesn't make any sense. Now it's like, oh, he has the server. He's working with this thing, so that's probably going to also change her opinion of Ted even more. But at the end, we see like you have Paul looking out and he sees people in the distance, and it's like, okay, maybe he gave himself a temporary reprieve from the symptoms of his condition, seeing stuff, or is that, never know what's real and what's not. Then on the other side of things, we get a little bit with Gina and CM. They're kind of hiding out, it's like, well, we'll stay here until we can find, get in contact with the boss and everything. Little back and forth between Gina and CM, kind of understanding, because obviously, Gina's definitely softened up when it came to, because CM's like, oh, did you go in my wallet? And she's like, I was bored. And he was like, do I need to count my money? She's like, oh, so you can count now. And it's like, oh, impressive. So it's like, they're back and forth, but she's not as venomous, like, towards him, and, because she's softening up because she's seen a new side of him. Plus, I think her opinion had already started changing of him anyway, because I'm sure it even shocked her, like, oh, I actually care what happens to you, even though I seem like I kind of hate your guts, But kind of learning about, like, it's like, oh, look like you have some semblance of a family. He's like, I do, but they're not in his life anymore, because he's like, my son's 11, no, 12, and he probably doesn't even remember me, but he remembers, like, having a nice memories with them, but he walked away from his family. because before the whole, what was it, Rockridge situation, he was like, he had to leave them because he knew there would be reprisals against him for what was going to go down, so he didn't want his family involved, so he left. Once again, it seems like his wife or ex, at the very least, might be a part of that, because she said, you turn against your, his people, and he's like, cut that out. So it's like, she's still kind of in that bubble, which makes you think maybe his son Sally kind of in that bubble. So it's just kind of that cycle of hate. Like, once again, we see with CM, when he talked about it, like, what happened with his dad, like, him and his sister grew up in that world of hate because that's the way their dad was. So maybe his son's going to be up in the same circumstances. I mean, that's just based on what that little scene we got a couple episodes back kind of makes it seem like she's just as much a part of that world, because also, like, they be seen as, because if they weren't if she wasn't a part of that world, I feel like he'd be able to just easily take his family away. Like, he wouldn't have to worry about, but the reprisal came about. Well, there's always a possibility of them not being a part of that world, but reprisal was still coming after him, because I'm sure he was tight enough in that group for people to, I don't know. It makes you wonder, like, how long he's been out of his, son's life, because that Rockridge thing wasn't too long ago. I could have sworn they were saying like that was like 2 years ago in the story, but maybe I'm mistaken. But regardless. So there's that side of things. And then there's also everything with Shay and Ty. They get free. They chase after Narciso and Ethan. And, obviously it's like, oh, you're my blood. I'm your grandfather. You got Mayan blood in you. And that blood is all that matters. That's family. And obviously trying to get on a plane and go. But before they could, Ethan pulls a gun out on him, and it's like, oh. It's like I said it before, I thought it was kind of interesting how things kind of came full circle to a certain extent because of that. Because obviously, like, Nex was convincing him to take the gun and everything. And it's like, oh, Narciso's like, actually, I'm impressed. He's like, I was actually older than you the first time I ever had a gun in my hands. But it's like, do you actually know what to do? Luckily, his parents show up in time, And, there was that little back and forth between, Shay and her dad, because it's like, he's like, so what are you going to do? Like, it's one thing, because obviously I was arrested beforehand, but this time you get to take me in. But for her, it is, because he could tell, he's like, oh, but you've always wanted this situation. You wanted to pull that trigger. You could turn me in, because that would be the lawful thing to do, but you want to pull that trigger so badly. And the thing is, like, it makes you wonder, like, It's this complicated thing, because for him, it's like, he still believes, like, no, I'm my own man. But for her, it's like, I can't take the chance that you get arrested again, because if you get arrested again, this thing could just release you. She already knows how powerful this thing is. And the fact of the matter is, it could shift things and make it so that, like, he gets out again. So that her family will always be in danger. Like, she thought, and she'd even had the conversation with Ty, like, the reason why she didn't bring him up is like, he was as good as dead to me. He was in jail, and it's like, why didn't you tell me about it? It's like, that's such a complicated thing, because I'm like, to be fair, this is a dark side of her life. Nobody wants to talk about the dark stuff in her life, but it's like, we've been married, we have a kid together, like, you should open up about that. But even I'm like, I don't know, like, when you have something deadly like that in your life, like her dad, like, obviously we still don't know the ins and outs of what his situation was, but he was a very bad man. So it's like, of course you're never going to want to talk about that. Like, I'm sure in her mind it's like, oh, when do I bring that up in conversation? So yeah, my dad's like a really, really bad dude, and he's locked up in prison for life. It's like, she wanted to put it, she even said it herself, she's like, I wanted to bury it. Like, she never thought she'd have to worry about it. He was like as good as dead to her, but it's like, he came back because he had help, so she thought that side of her life she could bury, because I'm sure it's not just him she wanted to bury, all the memories associated with him, all the bad stuff she wanted to bury, and so when the time comes, Shay puts him down. I was like, oh, that's, and then Ty's like, wait, what happened? And she's trying to say, like, he came at her with a knife, but he was like, no, we know that's not true. You straight up, because if it was in self-defense, that's one thing, but it's also, well, she's not in the most lawful situation right now, because she's kind of on the run a little bit from the cops too, but it's also the situation of, like, for Ty, it's like, I don't even really know you. It's like, because before he had died, he said, like, you're mine because, like, you share my mark. And we learned from her, like, when she was 14, she tried to run away from her family. She tried to get her mom to leave. She packed a bag and everything, but her mom wouldn't leave, so she left on her own. But one of her dad's men found her, and to pay her back, to make it like, oh, no matter where you go, you'll always be mine. He carved he carved that H on her, because his whole thing was they called him the Axe or something like that. And so I'm assuming that's kind of like a we don't know the ins and outs of his situation. I assume like it was like some cartel shit, kind of like on the mafia, like people get nicknames because of what they do. So like maybe his thing is you used an axe on people, and that might have been it. But then Shay kind of hints to something where she was like, but basically her mom suffered the ramifications for it. Which kind of alludes to like the fact, because obviously she doesn't talk about her mom. She got even upset last episode. She was like, don't even bring up my mom. I guess it's probably like, oh, you're probably the one that like it was your failure that my daughter almost got away from me. It's like, so you're gonna have to be punished for, or maybe she was going to leave, but she probably stayed out of fear. It was probably that Stockholm syndrome, but abuse type of situation. Also, but him just being the scary dude that he was. Like, you can't expect someone to just be able to leave easily. So we don't know, but it seems like it's implying like her mom was killed by her dad, or at least maybe not even just her dad, his people, whatever the case may be. For her, it's like, I will not regret killing him. Her only regret is that he got off so easy, that it was so easy and done, because it's like all that he put my mom through, what he did to her mom. Like I said, she doesn't go into details, but you can probably only assume it was something really bad. So, but Taya's like, I don't really even know you, so I'm gonna be staying I'm gonna take Ethan with my parents. She's like, no, Ethan's safer with me. It's like, no. With everything going on, plus we need to figure out our situation. It's like, you get it. I get it, like, I mean, she did just straight up murder a dude. Her own dad, too, and that's I'm sure that's going to be a whole complicated issue, but also you've got to deal with this whole, rogue AI after you and everything, so there's a lot to it, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.